regular meeting for January the 27th. I am a co-chair of this committee. My name is Marquise Harris Dawson, council member from the 8th District. I am joined by my co-chair, Council Member Jose Huizar, also joined by members Mike Bonin, Gil Cedillo, and Kern Price. We want to thank everybody for being here. In our last meeting, we reviewed the Comprehensive Homeless Strategic Plan, which focuses on specific strategies dealing with demographics, no wrong door, governance, facilities, housing, land use, and funding options. Today, we will look at the recommended changes based on comments by the council members and many public statements that were made and submitted during the last meeting. I want to again thoroughly and sincerely thank the CAO and the CLA's office for providing quick turnaround of the amended strategies. I know it was not an easy endeavor and there was a lot of input last week, so we really appreciate your efforts. Along with the amended strategies, we will begin today discussing on implementation, what's ready to implement within a few months, and longer-term strategies that will need investments in the coming fiscal years. The implementation of the strategies proposed in the report will require a funding component, but in many cases we still need to identify the cost associated with the strategies as well as the sources from which they will be funded. The development of the fiscal year 2016-2017 budget presents the best opportunity to specify costs relative to the comprehensive strategic plan. I would like to ask that we prioritize homeless-related programs and propose new funding streams as a result of the report. The budget process is currently underway and will be released by Mayor Garcetti in late April. I'm confident that with his intent to focus on homelessness needs in the upcoming budget, we will see investments in housing and supportive services. We'll also work with the CAO and CLA, who will report cost estimates to finance and the many strategies we've identified that can be pursued immediately. And one reminder again, many of these recommendations relate to departments and issues that are of interest to other council committees, whether it be housing, planning and land use management, personnel, public safety, or health and mental health. As the reports come back to detail the implementation of any specific recommendations, it is to be expected that those interested committees will also have the opportunities to hear specific items. So without any more comments from me, if there's nothing else, opening comments from members, I'll ask the clerk to read item number 1.
Relative to the city's comprehensive homelessness strategy. This item was also referred to the Housing Committee.
Thank you. So I'd like now to call up our CLA, Sharon So, and our CAO, Miguel Santana. I believe the two of them can walk us through the major amendments that were made and allow for some time for some members to discuss, and then we'll take public comment.
Good afternoon. So the report that you have before you, dated January 26th, contains 35 updated strategies, 6 new strategies based on your actions from January 13. So we now have a total of 57 strategies over 8 topics in total. The report also contains guiding principles that were submitted by the chairs of this committee, and the purpose of that is really to assist policymakers in the future to determine prioritizing actions as well as funding decisions. The updated strategies, 35 of them, are mainly incorporate changes requested by members and include technical adjustments. Red lines are attached for your review. Most notable are revisions recognizing domestic violence as a factor, as well as incorporating the House LA initiatives. There are 6 new strategies identified as 5F, 7O, 7P, 7Q, 9J, and 9K. Most notable, once again, are the ones that incorporate House LA initiative, as well as women's homelessness and domestic violence, and also coordinating with LA Unified. Section 10 is related to the budget. That section was actually deferred from our last meeting. We would recommend that we, as a committee, consider those items as part of this committee meeting. And with that, we would suggest as a course of action now to consider the amended strategies that you have before you, as well as discuss and consider the budget recommendations contained in Section 10. And if the committee wishes to move forward to approve the recommendations contained in our updated report of January 26th. And our CAO and CLA staff are available here to discuss any of the updated strategies as well as new strategies that are before you.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything?
I have nothing more to add.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions or comments on the amended strategies as they're before you? Council Member Bonin?
Thank you. Let me start out by thanking both the CAO and the CLA for the work they've been doing on this. I think, as I said last time, you've done a phenomenal job. And I have the utmost respect for the work that both of your offices do. I'm being so effusive in my praise because I'm about to express some disappointment, because I felt, honestly, that some of the responses to my requests were under-responsive to what I had been seeking. And were sort of just thrown in as sort of somewhat as an afterthought to existing policy recommendations. That came under one of them came under the heading of the coordinated entry system. I had asked there, and I thought I spoke at fair length last time about my concern that we were talking about the coordinated entry system, capital C, capital E, capital S, and was concerned about coordinated entry systems generally, and wanted to make sure that we weren't leaving behind the TAE and the family, the HPFS systems. And I noted that because of Home for Good and the United Way, the coordinated entry system has gotten a lot of support and a lot of development. And I noted that the other two systems aren't as strong, and that the goal is to merge the three of them. And I was looking for additional recommendations on how we can be helping to strengthen those two systems. And instead, all I got was, as I understood it, as I caught it anyway, a sort of addition of a sort of a subordinate clause in the policy paper, adding HPFS and TAE to the existing paper. And I was looking for something more substantive and meaty about how those systems can be strengthened so they can get to the point of merging, because otherwise kids and families are just going to get sort of lost in the system. I had a small one under facilities, and I think this was just a miscommunication on my part. I'll take the fall for this. I asked for a recommendation on increasing public restrooms, and that was put into the Lava May recommendation as mobile showers and restrooms. I think mobile restrooms are great, but I also think we need to look more broadly at restrooms. You know, might we want to keep some of our rec and parks restrooms open later? I was looking for something about stationary restrooms as well as mobile, so I was looking for something, a standalone on that. On facilities, I had also requested a policy recommendation regarding sobering centers, and I still don't feel like that was teased out sufficiently. It's still sort of left under the purview of LAFD and LAPD, and I think it needs to be a little bit broader than that. I think LAFD and LAPD have a certain amount of experience that is important for the development of sobering centers, but I think that probably needs to be an area where we're working more closely with county health in order to make them work. And given that the county health folks here are the ones who developed it in San Francisco, I think it's important for that to be called out separately. And the remaining ones were under housing. I had asked for policy recommendations on how the city or philanthropists can buy into the flexible housing subsidy program, and about master leasing programs. And both of those were added into a policy brief on 10B, I believe, which is just things that could be done with a trust fund. And that's way too far out, and it's as if we ever develop a trust fund. I think these are something that should be policy options that are more readily available, and I was disappointed that those weren't more prominent. Instead was just sort of buried as part of something that is a potential use of a potential funding source that we haven't even committed to. And my last one was, I appreciate that you did add my policy recommendation for shared housing. I just wanted to point out that it's very much defined by the universe of an organization in my district, SHARE, which does wonderful work. But I just think the scope of what's out there for shared housing is probably bigger than this one organization.
We could certainly, this is your plan, and so throughout, both when we originally submitted it and in the cover memo that we issued this week, we defined it as that and as a draft, as a work in progress. And so in all the areas you talked about, there's certainly an opportunity to address them. I'll try to address the ones that I can, and then I'll ask Lhasa if Peter wouldn't mind joining us for the coordinated entry system piece, since the strategy recommends Lhasa as the vehicle for strengthening the coordinated entry system, but also streamlining it, as you talked about. On the facility, certainly there is a number of places where we talk about restrooms, but having a focused strategy just on increasing capacity of restrooms, not just mobile, but stationary ones. We could certainly add that as part of the plan that ultimately goes to council. On the sobriety centers, maybe it wasn't explicit, but when I met with the chief, specifically on the sobriety centers, it was in context of the programs that he's working with the county health department. So we know that the county health department is an important part of that program. We already assume it as part of the conversation we're having with the fire department. We could call it out specifically in that strategy.
Thank you.
On housing, we did talk about the role of philanthropy in a broader sense when it comes to the Funders Collaborative that United Way has been organizing for the last several years, specifically to fund both the coordinated entry system and sort of the programmatic aspects associated with that. But again, as you pointed out, that's certainly something we could call out and give more focus to, specifically to fund vouchers, the expansion.
Yeah, it was both philanthropists and the city that I was looking at. And I think it's important to have that called out separately because, the Funders Collaborative is wonderful, but it may have a tendency to focus expenditures in one certain area. And I think if we've learned anything is we need to look at various different strategies in various different areas and be innovative for different populations. And so that's sort of what I was looking for there.
Okay, so we'll call that out and have a separate strategy just on that point. And then on the shared housing, certainly that could be amended so that it's beyond just the one program that was identified that's in your district, but to have a broader conversation around that. So I think I addressed all of them with the exception of coordinated entry. Maybe, Peter, you could take a stab at responding to that.
Master leasing, I guess that ties in a little bit with the flexible housing subsidy programs.
Right.
So I guess you could address that in the same policy
Yes.
brief. Part of that's about donations, but part of that is also about the city elevating as a policy option master leasing, which has been working very successfully with some organizations, Ocean Park Community Center and stuff. I had actually been looking at that as sort of as a policy objective, separate from what folks could donate into.
I hear you. Okay.
Thank you. Peter?
Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I think that it is our intention to ensure that there's a tight integration between the coordinated entry systems that have been built. I am I'm not sure that I would characterize the homeless family solution system as not as strong or somehow less robust than the coordinated entry system. They function differently, but they are both fully functioning. They're leasing people, and we place over 1,000 families into permanent housing. The outcomes are extremely good in the family system. It is important that we integrate the back end of them, and we have a similar reporting structure in terms of the data. Those are things that we're working on right now. The Transition Age Youth system is in pilot phase right now, so it is at a different level of construction. The intent is to pilot it where it is and then spread it out to the rest of the spas in a similar manner that the coordinated entry system for single adults was derived. It is our intention that they all reside on the HMIS back end. They have the similar infrastructure and they have a similar sort of connection to the community organizations that are going to be the leads for them.
Now, I understand that. My point was that we have 3 different coordinated entry systems, and we want them to become one. And that's stated in our policy. But then we talk about, there's a number of different policy recommendations in that section that are all about strengthening and improving one of those 3 systems, the capital CES. And I was looking for recommendations on how we get the other 2 to the place where they're ready to merge with the first one.
Excellent. I would be happy to provide information on that to the CAO and CLA.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Mr. Cedillo?
Yes, let me reiterate the comments of my colleague, particularly as they relate to the incredible need for us to add restrooms in public facilities. As we see the proliferation of these villages, they don't have the infrastructure, and we just have to, and we do. And the fact of the matter, not to beat the horse, but the fact of the matter is we do have an infrastructure in place, and we should take advantage of it. It's a lot preferred over what the choices that people are making now, and those are the complaints that I get from my constituents. And they would go a long way in alleviating a lot of the stress and tension that exists between the homeless community and our community in general. But also, let me restate the incredible appreciation for the very thoroughness of the work, the detail, and the thoughtfulness. And also, I want to thank the chairs also for moving the committee forward in the way that's productive. It really gives us a way to walk forward to solve this. As you know, if I may say, Sharon and Miguel, Peter, my interest is in the bricks and mortar, the long-term solutions. It is a question of us creating more housing stock. It's just that simple. Supply and demand is part of a reality, and when we have increased supply, it impacts the demand, it impacts the cost, and it has an impact on what we've seen, separate from the challenges of substance dependency and mental illness, but on those who have been moved to homelessness as a product of lack of supply, this is the answer, and this is the solution. And so I'm pleased that our proposals are in the report. We continue to have a great angst and initiative, a great angst to move our House LA initiative and get it in place, because I know that there is a community of developers and builders who are waiting to build in Los Angeles and to play their role on this. And so, again, all 3 of you and to the chairs, thank you for this discussion and for the opportunity to be part of this implementation of this plan. And we look forward to continuing to participate today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Cedillo. There's no other comments. We will thank all of you and ask you to stand by through public comment, and we'll wrap it up with a vote. Folks, you have 1 minute for public comment. I will call out 3 names in a row. If you can approach the podium, state your name and begin speaking. We'll start with Jerry Jones. I can't understand this name. Sean Oni. And Ms. Sankara.
Hi, I'm Jerry Jones with the Inner City Law Center. I think the last time the committee met, the county was also holding a similar discussion on its homelessness plan, and so there may not have been as much in the way of attendance as folks would have wanted to have been in two places at once. But I just want to say that that should not lead you to underestimate the amount of enthusiasm and appreciation for the work of this committee and of the folks on the city staff who have made an excellent plan. I think it's gotten stronger with the addition of the House LA provisions and the domestic violence pieces, but to now turn our attention to the money, which is where this is either going to make a dent in a huge crisis or not. And that money needs to recognize we have both an affordable housing crisis and a homelessness crisis. So we look forward to working with the committee and the Budget Committee and others here at City Hall on the question of funding. Thank you.
My name is Sean Oney. I'm the volunteer manager at the Midnight Mission. We believe that the most important component to affect any meaningful change is self-sufficiency. We must provide programs to individuals and families experiencing homelessness that help them take responsibility and be accountable to themselves and to their children. They need tools for real change that include structure, sobriety, education, counseling, and job training and placement. On Skid Row, we have found people must be highly motivated to change. People struggling with mental illness and addiction often lack that motivation. They need our help. For people suffering from severe mental illness or those who are physically disabled, Housing First makes sense. For those struggling with alcohol and drug abuse and single mother-led families, the Housing First model is particularly ineffective. We ask that you include funding for poverty and homeless programs that assist on these services. In addition, and also the most challenging, we need to build more housing or retrofit existing housing. They require services to help people become more self-sufficient. I know this from experience. When I became homeless in 2013, I entered the Midnight Missions Recovery Program. Today, I'm self-sufficient and dignity has been restored. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Asiola Sankara, and I'm with the Alliance for Community Transit LA. ACT LA is a coalition of 29 organizations campaigning for land use standards that lead to a net gain of affordable housing and quality jobs near transit. 3 key policies we urge you to consider are, first, a citywide value capture policy. Community members should receive proper return from development projects that have benefited from public resources. Second, incentives for affordable housing production. Recent community benefit agreements have expanded affordable housing to extremely low-income households. These important precedents should be scaled up citywide. Third, we are losing our affordable housing stock. Preservation strategies are a critical piece of housing low and no-income community members. Our coalition is focused on increasing affordability near transit. We echo comments made at previous meetings on the need for immediate decriminalization of homeless Angelenos and reinvestment of resources into health and housing. ACT LA thanks the Homeless and Poverty Committee for initiating this conversation, and we look forward to working with you towards a Los Angeles
Thank
with
you so
affordable
much.
housing for all. Thank you.
Ms. Fanny Ortiz, Maria Patino, Chris Coe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fanny Ortiz, and I am a member of ACT LA and a TOD resident of Boyle Heights. Having experienced displacement within my community and endured homelessness for 2 years, I can testify to the impact of affordable housing has made in the quality of my life. As a single mother of 5 with my youngest of special needs, I am a self-sustainable mother, and I am currently working on my BA. I can engage with my community, and I am also a budget advocate with the City of LA and the treasurer for the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council. I believe we all have the right to live with dignity, and ACT LA reflects the needs of many families with stories similar to mine. Thank you.
Hello, I have a letter that we submitted on behalf of SAGE, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. So good afternoon, my name is Maria Patino, and I'm with SAGE, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy. We want to thank the committee members and committee co-chairs, Harris Dawson and Wisad, for advancing this important conversation. We have submitted for all committee members' consideration a letter to Councilman Harris Dawson's office that calls for the creation of a chapter on homelessness prevention and anti-displacement strategies. The focus of homelessness prevention cannot be overlooked, as we know displacement is a powerful driver for the thousands of people who enter homelessness each month. Among the strategies that are crucial to homelessness prevention are protection and strengthening of tenant rights, ending the loss of public housing, and land use strategies that protect RSO housing and build new affordable housing. These and other strategies are crucial to ending homelessness. If we don't take on a homelessness prevention approach, we miss addressing significant causes sending LA families to the streets. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Council Members. Chris Coe with United Way and Home for Good. I just want to again point out and applaud the fact that this report notes two crises that have happened over time, the affordable housing crisis and the homelessness crisis. And I think one of the most important recommendations of this are its twin solutions to establish a homeless services trust fund and an affordable housing trust fund. So recommendations 10A and 10B I think are critical. I think all today we'll be talking about different ways to fund those things, but the ongoing vehicle to do that and have annual set-asides for those pieces I think are critical. The comment has always been we've had plans before, we've never funded them. I think you all have the opportunity to make history and change that dialogue and critique, and I would love to help you all do that. And I think as you spend the money, I would just urge you not to have a spending outcome only, but to work with LASA, the CAO, and other offices to set a numerical housing placement outcome and package a bunch of interventions toward that end versus picking off one program over another. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. That concludes our public comment for items number one. I would refer to the clerk. So we have the amendments before us as presented by the CAO and CLA. We have amendments that were submitted by Councilmember Bonin and the co-chairs. And we have amendments being added by Councilmember Cedillo. If you'd like to speak to those, Mr. Cedillo.
Yes, I'd like to prioritize funding for fiscal year 2016-2017 for preservation, as was indicated, so that we don't continue to lose units and exacerbate the problem as we go forward. And would like to have the CAO, or HCID rather, work with the CAO on a plan to renegotiate those covenants. Last year, we invested $9 million in preservation in my district, and I understand the urgency of not losing affordability of the housing stock while we're trying to engage and tackle this problem. We are at risk of losing 15,000 units of affordable units in the next 5 years, and so that has to be a priority that we move forward with, and that's why it's important for HCID to work with the CAO on these negotiations. It is actually probably one of our best strategies to move forward. And so that's the recommendation, and I would like to ask HCID to work with the CIO in identifying any current projects in our pipeline that may be in need of small bridge funding. There are projects I know in my district in which a small amount of money will bring us a significant amount of units with wraparound services, and so we should look at that. I want the CAO and our HCID to work with CAO to identify current projects in our pipeline that may be in need of small bridge funding that would expedite those projects and make those units available immediately, making this funding a priority for next fiscal year. If I may, Mr. Chair, I have a model project, Avenue 26, veteran housing, more than shovel ready. We've already turned ground on it. It's transit centered, full wraparound services, but because of the nature of this crisis, because of the cost, because of the lack of adequate housing, prices have gone up and the deal is coming up short. And so that's an example, and I'm sure all of us in our districts have those types of projects where somebody needs bridge funding to close out the deal, and I want to make that a priority on the next budget. That's it, huh? Mr. Chair, that's it for now.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo my colleagues' concerns about the expiring covenants. In the 9th District, we have about 1,000 of these covenants that are going to expire over the next several years. And these are, I think, as important as building new affordable housing. In fact, we have a little more control. You know, with new affordable housing projects are subject to a lottery. And so you have folks from all over who may end up in those projects. The projects where covenants are expiring, you know you've got families from an area living there. Specifically, I'm talking about the 9th District. And so the expiration of these covenants is something we should be looking at citywide, especially in areas where affordable housing is an issue. And so I certainly would support my colleagues' requests for some additional focus and attention on these expiring covenants and, again, how we make these resources available where they're needed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Price. So do we have a motion to accept, to adopt the amendments as presented today and by the CAO and CLA? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Hearing no opposition, that is the order. Excellent. Thank you. We have, I have a couple cards that came in after we began discussion on item 1. I'm going to put those in public comment. As a rule, we don't take public comment cards once we've started discussing the item. So we will ask you to come up and speak during public comment, and if you have 2 cards, we'll give you 2 minutes to comment on that. Okay, so that takes us to our second item, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 2 is a motion by Council Members Huizar, Harris Dawson, Wesson, Bonin, and Krikorian relative to the steps necessary to place a measure on the next general or city election ballot to raise new revenue needed to address homelessness.
Excellent. So we will have a staff report on this as well. Yes. Our CAO and CLA. This is our discussion on budget and revenue.
Yes, item number 2 is a motion which instructs staff to present something. Just 1 second. Yes, to report on the steps necessary to place a measure on the next general or city election ballot to raise revenue to address homelessness. This is asking for a report from your CAO and CLA. We could give a quick overview of the process as it stands today, but in terms of actual options, we would need to report back to you on the specifics of any particular funding option that you choose. There was an attachment to the comprehensive homelessness strategy that lists out some of the options are available to you that could be presented as a bond measure, and we can discuss those if you wish.
CAO and CLA, if we were to put something, or if this committee and the council were to want to put this on the November ballot, what deadlines are we looking at?
So to place a matter before on the November ballot on the state general election, you would need to instruct the city attorney to prepare a resolution by June 29th, and the council would need to adopt that resolution by July 1.
July 1. And given where we are here with a motion. We're going to hopefully refer this to both offices for review and report back. Are we on time for a November ballot initiative, you think? Do we have sufficient time?
I mean, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Okay.
No, absolutely. Your drop dead deadline is, as the CLA indicated, June 29th.
Okay. And it doesn't mean we, at this time, would like to do the November. We would have to weigh all our options. Obviously, these things take into consideration not only what the council and public's desire, but the best time to place this on the ballot along with other items, so that conversation is still yet to be had. But I think this is a great way to move forward to find a consistent and ongoing revenue stream for a number of the items in our strategic plan, and I look forward to getting their report back about what the options are for us and what sources would probably be the best.
At this point, if under the committee's direction, we'll go ahead and do that. Is it your expectation that the report would sort of give further information on the entire list of items that we've identified, or are there some that you, at this point, are ready to take off the list, or do you just want to get a comprehensive report at this point?
I think we're looking for a comprehensive report on what are our different options.
Shadia?
I don't know if it's, I have a position on this already, but Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's value for us. There's also an initiative that's being taken around that may be on the ballot that would have an adverse impact on development and building in the city, and I don't know if you could look at that in addition to this, so that we can have an understanding of the danger that this other initiative has for us to address the concerns that we have in the city.
We can certainly report back on that.
Thank you. Just optically, I think it would be better to have those two reports separate, I think, but probably simultaneous. So I just want to be clear on the recommendation is, in the CAO-CLA report, there's 1, 2, 4 or 5 pages in a sort of chart form of different alternatives. You'd be coming back with a comprehensive analysis of which ones are best to move forward on?
I think to the extent we could identify how much potential revenue could be generated, what the process would be, if there's been efforts in the past to do it, whether just jurisdictions have done, sort of do a deeper dive on the list. I think that's sort of what we're looking at.
Sure. I mean, there's a number of them I'm very supportive of. It's just some of them I don't think you could do simultaneously. You know, I'd be very happy to put an initiative before the voters, and it could be a sort of a general obligation one. You couldn't do conversion fees or demolition fees at the same time, because we're certainly not going to put 2 or 3 different revenue-raising ones for homelessness on the ballot simultaneously. I imagine we'd kill them all that way. But so there's a number of very good ones in there, and I'm happy to discuss offline. This comprehensive analysis, though, won't do anything to slow down what I think is on a separate track, which is the nexus study for the linkage fees, will it?
No, the funding for the nexus studies will likely be in the next FSR, so that could begin in the current fiscal year.
Great. Okay. And when do you anticipate you would have your analysis back, so we'd have time to process stuff before June 29?
Most of the information actually is already contained in the attachment. We can probably scale it down a little bit. It is kind of extensive already, but we can kind of give you an idea of, you know, what the process would be for each one of these and the amount of revenue to be generated, as you pointed out. Some of them would be mutually exclusive of each other, and some of them actually have more potential to generate greater amounts of money. You wouldn't want to do 10 things if you can do 1 thing, for example. And looking at this, one option that you might want to consider, we did this actually a few years ago, and unfortunately the measure didn't pass, but there was actually a countywide sales tax measure that was placed on the ballot. And that would have generated money for not only the city, but also the county. At that time, it would have been dedicated for public safety. But that is something certainly to consider, having a collaborative effort with the county as well.
Yeah, I'd recommend a collaborative approach with the county. I would strongly caution, this is just my opinion, but strongly caution against a proposed sales tax increase as the mechanism to raise revenue. Because in November, there's almost certainly going to be a sales tax increase countywide for transportation. If there's 2 sales tax increases on the ballot, well, actually, I don't know that both of them could prevail.
That was just one example, but it also could
Yeah.
be documentary transfer tax, for example.
Absolutely, which I think is a good thing to be looking at. And then there's also, but there's not just one option that we have to choose. We could do a ballot measure, and there's some other things in your recommendations that don't require going to the voters that we could do.
And of course, and in the context of the budget as well.
Right, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Price? Thank you. So I think that concludes our time with you on this. We're going to go to public comment on item number 2. We have Tommy Newman, Jojo Smith, Jerry Newman, and Ruth Sarnoff. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, council members. Tommy Newman here on behalf of Stephanie Klasky-Gamer, the CEO at LA Family Housing, which is the Spot 2 coordinator for both individuals and families. Thank you each so much for either visiting yourself or sending staff out to the Valley and checking in on us and seeing what we're doing. In the context of the ballot initiative, whatever it might be, I think there are 3 interesting questions just to be thinking about right now. And so the first one would be, are the voters ready? Yes, we know they're ready if they believe that the solution we're proposing will work. And we know that housing works. And we have a whole lot of examples to show why that works. And so we as a community are ready to tell that story. And the veterans homelessness example is a great one. 2, is November the right place? Yes, let's pair it with Measure R. Housing is infrastructure, transportation is infrastructure. Let's marry those 2 things together. And the third is, can we build all this housing without massive political consequences? And the answer is yes. LA Family Housing builds all of its properties without zone changes, without general plan amendments. So there's a way to do it without making everybody really mad. Thank you so much, and we look forward to working with all of you.
Jojo Smith with Los Angeles Community Action Network. You know, we wouldn't need to do this. We wouldn't need this initiative if we wouldn't be putting all this money in, bring back Broadway, and giving all the money to LAPD. You know, if we take some money away from LAPD, we wouldn't need all this. We could put it in creating solutions for homelessness instead of giving 53 to 57% of our city budget to LAPD.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jerry Newman on behalf of the LA Chamber of Commerce, the United Way, and Home for Good. I would like to speak in support of the idea of finding new solutions and better solutions to fund the various needs that we have for housing. I would point out that in terms of the $100 million that you've spoken about, that's 1% of your budget. Finding 1% of your budget for both housing individually as well as for homelessness should be an objective of yours. But beyond that, finding a way to fund the broader issue makes a difference. And I would ask you 2 things. One, as you look at a ballot measure, look at it most comprehensively as you were talking about, but to raise the most amount of money because money matters. We have seen how much we can do when we have the resources and dollars to do it. We will be ending or eliminating veteran homelessness this year, we hope, by virtue of the resources that have been put there. And I would also say in the last few seconds I have, Councilmember Cedillo makes an excellent point. As you look at the ballot measures that are out there, those could impede development. And if we wait for the funding in a new ballot measure, we may have lost the opportunity to develop the things that we need today to solve our problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ruth Sarnoff.
Welcome, Ms. Sarnoff.
I think that any ballot measure that promotes a parcel tax, which is another way of taxing poor people, or sales tax, they all fall in the same category, just like some of the ways that the utility bills are being played with now from all of the different bills that people get. I think that it's important that we look at some other things, like if you're going to have a parcel tax, then base it on the size of the parcel. Because we've got some people with huge parcels and some people with minuscule parcels. And if we really tax people fairly, we will tax those big parcels. And maybe we could look at some taxes through the big hotels out there. We've given the tourist industry and hotels and stuff a lot of support financially. Let's get some of it back.
Thank you so much. Two names, two cards I'm required, where I've been given instruction I'm required to call up, is someone calling themselves Adolf Hitler-Negro.
Thank you once again for violating the Ralph M. Brown Act. And Buckeasy don't want to call my card on item number 1. But you see, you have to. Also, you have to reopen item 1 and re-vote on it because you failed to satisfy public comment. But you tried to ram it through, but you see, people are watching you. They understand you. We know about your reports. You try to trick me. This is item 2, but I know we're talking about item 1, so I'm staying on the topic. Item 1, another scam. Tonight in Hollywood, Kevin James, Zev Yaroslavsky, and our controller Ron Galpert at 7 p.m. are hosting a forum by Conan Nolan and Channel 4 to talk about living in a world of high taxes, and yet you're over here raising our taxes. Over there, they're lowering our taxes, and over here, they're raising our taxes. Bullshit.
That's your time. If there are no more questions or comments on this item, we will continue it until we're prepared to hear back from staff. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order. And I want to now transition us into the conversation about item number 10. On our strategic plan, the budget and financing of the particular items that we have in the budget. We've gotten off to a good start with some particular programming, but we know going forward it'll call on us to produce different budgets and different sources of revenue. So I'd ask the CLA and CAO to return to the table to engage us in a conversation about budget for the strategic plan.
So as we indicated at the last meeting, we really structured the budget section in both looking at specific services that been identified that could be funded as part of next year's fiscal budget. And so what we are recommending is that as part of this process, your committee, as well as the entire council, start identifying prior to the release of the budget priority areas in which you believe would be important to start doing as soon as possible. And so as part of Section 10, there are specific items that we've identified. We do have to caveat that the numbers that we put aside those items are based on what other jurisdictions have done throughout the state and throughout the country. And so it would be appropriate at this point if you directed us to take more time, identify what the actual cost would be for those specific items so that we could determine what would be required for next year. In the report, we also talk about housing and recommend a strategy that emphasizes the use of vouchers initially and then moving towards a much broader investment towards bricks and mortar. And we outline sort of one way of doing it and talk about what those costs would be based on an analysis, a gap analysis that was presented to you early on during this process. Those are the best figures we have today based on the point in time analysis that was done with LASA and the United Way. And so that would be the best information we'd have. We obviously, as you move forward and determine how to fund the capital, that would need to be reviewed on an annual basis. So we could certainly walk you through the details of that if you have any questions, and I can invite my staff to help do that.
Questions from members? Mr. Cedillo? I can't see you. So
Fine, I'm sorry.
All right, if there is nothing further, we gave you all a list of strategies that we thought should be prioritized. I'm supposed to read them into the record, so they are 3A, 3C, 3B, under facilities improvement, 6A and 6E is an elephant. Under providing providing shelter and housing, 7A, 10B is in boy, and then under miscellaneous, we have 4A and 7A and 7F. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'd like to add that to that 7Q, which is the House LA package, and add that to the priorities. And we actually heard that last week in housing, so it's already heard. I'd ask that it be waived from Plum so that it goes directly to the floor.
All right, and I got a few more. Thank you, Mr. Cedillo. And then support for city departments and the no wrong door approach. We have 3C as in cat, 3D as in door. Under, yes. And then for facility improvement, 6C is in cat, 6D is in door. And providing shelter and housing, 7H, 7A, 9K is in kite, 7B is in boy, 10D is in door, 10C is in cat, 7D, 6B is in boy, under miscellaneous, 4A, and 16, 5A. Anything else from the members?
The only thing I'd ask of staff is, as we're looking at, because we just did two lists of funds, one for the remainder of this fiscal year, if we can scrounge up some money, and then for the next fiscal year. For the remainder of this year, there's some things on there like the storage program and stuff like that. If there are things in there that we may not be able to identify funds for a complete comprehensive citywide program, having funds where we could do pilots of the storage program in a couple districts and stuff like that, I think would still be useful, even if we can't get everything, in March or May or something.
Okay.
Mr. Steele.
Yes, I want to diddle that on the storage and the restrooms and showers. And then I want to add that we prioritize funding for any public lots identified for affordable and or permanent supportive housing in the next budget.
Mr. Price?
No, I'll support those recommendations made.
Excellent. So I would move that we adopt the amendments, the guiding principles, and the 6 new recommendations that staff has proposed for the comprehensive homeless strategy, as well as the amendments that we made today. I would also like to instruct the clerk, with the assistance of the CLA, to consolidate the council files directly associated with the comprehensive homeless strategy listed in section 11.9 of the appendix, including council file 15-1357. I also move that we request that the list of items for immediate implementation be considered for funding in the current fiscal year, and that we request the mayor to provide funding in the next budget for the list of items for implementation in fiscal year 16-17. Mr. Clerk, we'd also like for this to be scheduled for the full council on February 9th. So if we have a second. Second. Hearing no objection, that'll be the order.
If I could ask one question. I just want to make sure there were amendments that were made today, additional strategy things. That will be ready when we go to council, and we don't need to come back to committee on that, yes?
Yes.
Good. Don't want to hold anything up. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you all both. We are now, the desk is clear and we come to general public comment. We have a number of cards, so we'll ask people to be considerate and stick to time. We have Kevin Michael Key, Yvonne Autry, Don Garza. And Mr. Garza, you'll have 2 minutes because I got your card late on item 1.
Good morning, council members. Kevin Michael Key, Skid Row advocate. I work for United Coalition East Prevention Project. Just a few brief comments. Hopefully the money will be there for all the good things you're trying to fund. One thing, the amendments to the comprehensive homeless strategy is 79 pages. It was only released yesterday. That's not allowing adequate time for public review and adequate input. Moving shelter to bridge housing defunds much needed emergency beds and contributes to homelessness. Report says LASA should. We're respectfully requesting that LASA must report and work closely with those defunded substitute dollars. And then finally, we strongly urge you to look at the existing vacant facilities, such as the 2 Salvation Army properties in Skid Row, as homeless facilities. We urge you to deny any attempts to redevelop uses such as those for market rate housing in the Skid Row community, which has so much homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. If you're next in the queue, you should walk on up so we don't have to use that time.
Right. I'd like to request more time for the public to address this in all items at all of your meetings. As a Black American, I'm still waiting for my 40 acres, a mule, and reparations. I do not expect, through the new modern technology, to enjoy my reparation on Skid Row. You want an all-white society. You want an all-rich society. I know what you're using, and you're using the money that should be used to reinvest in the community, not just to proliferate mind-controlled techniques that break people down, because you're engineering homeless, poverty-stricken, infirm, sick, ugly, poor, diseased people, damaged people, and dysfunctional people, because it is a business. So I object to that money's being used because it is exposed. And again, this is neo-Nazi scare tactics. You murder, you put it on YouTube, and you expect us to be afraid to address what's really happening in your engineering of the homeless, and then denying them the righteous services that the service providers are not providing.
Thank you so much. So Mr. Garza has 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But that doesn't detract from the fact that I'm very upset that I wasn't able to speak on the subject at the time. I was a United States Marine, earned a combat action ribbon in combat. Men I served with earned silver stars. We understand the urgency of human life. We understand the sanctity of human life. Unfortunately, there's only been a couple of council people in council chambers who understand the urgency and the investments we made of the human lives in this country. I sent email, I've spoken to people, but we had one woman froze to death on the streets of Skid Row. And that's because our council member was too busy tending other people's gardens and other people's council districts. You should have been tending to our council district. I come to you and asked you and pleaded with you in December, with your people. We're going to have rains, and we're going to have casualties the first night it rains. And I was spurned so you can listen to people like Betsy Starman telling you we are enabling people. This is a war. It's not just a war on homelessness. It's a war to keep people alive long enough to get back in society. These are the people I serve to protect. I'm not a coward. I've raised over $2,000. I have tarps and tents in my house, and when it rains at night, I'm going to be out there looking for the exposed in Skid Row. Jose Huizar, are you going to be out there with me? Probably not. Because if I ask you to, you probably will not be there. Because you listen to people like Betsy Starman telling you, if I take a tent to somebody while it's raining, then I'm enabling that person. They should hit bottom. Bottom in Skid Row is death now. There is no bottom. Understand that. I was there 11 years. Jose, you failed me and you failed us. If you left her to die on the street and sidewalk, you'll
That's your
allow me
time. John Seeley, Eric Aves, Jaime Garcia, Ruth Sarnoff.
Thank you. I've learned from the last few minutes that some group of people recommends prioritizing 3C as in cat, 6D as in door, and some other group thinks that it should be 7A and 4A and 7F, and then someone else thinks that there should be 7H and 7A and 9K as in kite. Now, is this a public meeting in which you are trying to inform the citizenry about what's going on? Or is this some transaction to be conducted entirely in code? I mean, you know, one has to say WTF, W as in what, T as in the, and so on. I mean, what are we supposed to be doing here as a public body trying to inform the public about what we're doing?
Thank you.
Hi, council members. I had item number 1. You said you'd give us 2 minutes for folks who had agenda item number. Oh.
Roll with it. Yes, go.
All right. So I'm seeing something before me called priorities for request for funding for current fiscal year. It says something about no wrong door approach. It is definitely a wrong door approach if it involves a police squad car door or a jail cell. Okay, and that's what we're talking about here. Criminalization, we've been talking about it, but it's very important that we not see this as a separate conversation than what you're having around bond measures, ballot measures, how we're going to find new revenue streams. If we're going to continue to arrest the people we're trying to help, it defeats the entire purpose of the entire planning process that all of you are participating in right now. I've heard each and every one of all 5 of you say that criminalization is over. It is not. Come to Skid Row. I invite you to walk with us. Meet the same blind man who's gotten the same citation for a non-violent infraction 5 days in a row. Come meet the guy who got CES application on one day and the next day got arrested for having not a dog on a leash when he actually had a dog on a leash. Okay? We have to talk about stopping criminalization, or else all the money you're talking about finding, all the services we're trying to connect folks to is just not going to be possible. People are losing faith. People aren't service resistant. They're resistant to interacting with LAPD, walking around with service providers. They're resistant to the idea that, hey, I'm going to get on a wait list, and while I'm waiting on that wait list, I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to get cited because I don't have a tent. We're talking about finding new bathrooms. That's an important part of the conversation. The other side of that conversation is people who are going to get arrested because they have no other place to urinate. That's not supporting public urination. That's supporting facilities and services that people need. We got to get more money into permanent supportive housing, and until those shovels are in the ground, and until we find until we find those folks in those buildings, until we do that, we have to stop arresting those people. Or else, 10 years from now, we're gonna have another failed plan. Except we're gonna have $2 billion that we've put out of a ballot measure, and we're gonna have wasted all that money for what? To come back 10 years from now. You all will be gone. Some of us will be gone. And the folks in Skid Row are still going to be there. And the folks in Venice are still going to be there. And the folks in San Pedro that Councilmember Buscaino so desperately wants to get out of his community, they're going to be somewhere. A jail cell or the streets. I really, really, really implore all of you to think about this holistically. That they're not separate conversations. The fight against criminalization is the same fight that you're trying to do and end homelessness. And to not recognize that is to fail the entire point of all this.
Thank you. Jojo Smith and Craig Roberts will be after the speaker.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair. Jaime Garcia with the Hospital Association of Southern California. I did submit a comment letter, but I would just keep this brief. And I just want to, on behalf of the association, thank the Chief Administrative Officer and the CLA for this report. Really demonstrates a blueprint of how we're going to address this complex issue. And we fully understand that's not something that's going to be addressed and resolved overnight, and it's going to require short, medium, and long-term strategies. But I stand here before you to let you know that the hospitals really would like and really believe that priorities in terms of bridge housing, which was discussed earlier, the voucher program, as well as rapid rehousing will really go a long way in terms of helping those individuals who need immediate placement when they're coming out of the different institutions. So I thank you for your time and look forward to being a partner with you as this debate continues to take place.
Thank you.
Jojo Smith, Los Angeles Community Action Network. Just like my colleague said, criminalization is still going on. You know, y'all sit here and talk about measures and doing all this, but come down Skid Row and see how the criminalization of LAPD is doing. You know, we keep giving LAPD more and more money. We allow them to do all they do. We need to start taking some of that money from them instead of doing cuts on schools, doing cuts on the fire. Let's start doing cuts on LAPD, because LAPD is taking all of our money and not doing nothing but criminalization. We need to get away from criminalization, like the federal government says. You know, y'all want that money from the HUD. We need to start working to get that money and stop letting LAPD criminalize homelessness. Because homelessness is going to be here until y'all put money in the right places.
Craig Roberts, LA Community Action Network, and resident of Skid Row. I'd like to read you a definition. Criminalization is where formal and informal law enforcement policies are adopted to limit where individuals who experience homelessness can congregate and punish those who engage in life-sustaining or natural human activities in public spaces. This is a definition cited by the United States Interagency on Homelessness. And lo and behold, this is exactly what we see on the Nickel, on 5th Street, on Skid Row every day. We see LAPD conducting selective and racist activities to harass and enforce neutral laws such as jaywalking, loitering, and open container laws against people who are poor and homeless. This is obviously a well-thought-out plan of attack by the city of Los Angeles, aka the LAPD. You need to stop it before you're called out by DOJ and HUD.
Thank you.
House keys, not handcuffs.
I also signed up for number 1, and I would like my 2 minutes.
Go ahead and start, Ms. Sarnoff.
I've only got 1 on there. Can I have 2? I'll feel comfortable then.
We'll take care of you. Just
Okay.
Let us have
All
it.
right. I just want to say that for a long time I have been asking for, when are you going to really define what housing is in a more direct way? What is for homeless people that are on the street right now, which we could put a lot of people in housing if we would do some renovating of a lot of empty housing. And we have thousands of these empty units. And you know who owns them, and you know who is the slumlord formed. Caltrans and Wells Fargo and some of the city property probably, and lots of other landlords. We don't tax the blighted homes, and because of it, we don't have money in the revenue side. That's number 1. Number 2, I think that it's very, very important that you put together something that's not so obtuse and untransparent that nobody in their right mind can understand it. And I wonder even if you understand what you're doing. So I plead with you. If you know what happened in New Orleans, and you know what's happened in Sandy Hook, and you know that we are facing, if not El Nino this year, then the next year. And if we started working our ass off right now, it would be still pretty hard. And I can tell you, when the tents fill up all of the storm drains, and people's belongings are all wet, and people are out there and wet, and we don't have any way to save their lives, and we lose lives here in Los Angeles, it's going to be one hell of a shame.
Thank you. We have Adolf Hitler Negro again from the Charlie Beck Picnic Retirement Party.
Charlie Beck, retire. You're a train wreck. Woo, woo, off the rails. That's right. Get rid of Charlie Beck. And Charlie Beck is out there terrorizing homelessness. That's why I have to wear a hood on this item, because it's Charlie Beck and his terrorist LAPD terrorizing homelessness. And then at the same time, you're over at Hollywood tonight at 7 o'clock with Zev Yaroslavsky, Kevin James, Ron Galperin, and all the white folks over there in Hollywood tonight discussing how to develop the city and get more of that $2,400 a month apartment bullshit built in over-densified Hollywood. So we're over here, it's a ruse. This is just a ruse. You ejected my card on item 2. I should get another minute. But you're becoming the biggest Uncle Tom in the city since Herb Wesson Jr. So I should get one more minute to talk. Okay.
Wesley Walker, General
I'll get one more
Dogon,
minute.
Kai
I had another
Atsumi.
card.
Hi, my name is Wesley Walker, Los Angeles Community Action Network. Criminalization of homelessness makes ending homelessness impossible, which makes any plan to end homelessness pointless. Let it include a plan to stop punishing people for being poor or homeless. The feds call criminalization formal and informal law enforcement, such as, policies such as 5611 adopted to limit where people who experience homelessness can congregate. Punish those who engage in life-sustaining natural human activities, public spaces. So we are not talking about just arrests. We're talking about people getting tickets as well. Because of the lack of investment in
Thank you, that's your time.
health.
That's your time. Thank you.
My number 2 council members in here. Everybody else was they on vacation or somewhere? General Dogon, civil rights organizer and Skid Row resident. Some members of city council think that the criminalization is only a matter of arrest. This isn't true. Criminalization is where formal and informal law enforcement policies are adapted to limit where individuals who experience homelessness can congregate and punish those who engage in life-sustaining or natural human activities in public spaces. This is a definition created by the United States Interagency on Homelessness. So when we talk about criminalization, we mean the total effect of laws like 5611 and 4118D and other quality of life offenses that make it impossible, right, for homeless people and homeless residents to get off the streets. Ever since the city declared a homeless state of emergency, LAPD has been on a racial rampage throughout Skid Row, confiscating mass property, writing citations, and arresting everyone under the disguise of Operation Healthy Streets, which has turned into Operation
Thank you.
Unhealthy Sweeps.
That's your time. That's your time.
Criminalizing the homeless and imprisonment is an archaic, inhumane solution to homelessness and poverty. Poverty is not a crime. For a humane solution to homelessness, quit criminalizing the homeless and apply for federal grant money for permanent housing for the homeless. Regulation as 5611 and criminalizing the homeless, taking their property makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to live in public spaces. Presently, the LAPD is in Skid Row, taking homeless property under various situations, including enforcing 5611 legislation and under Safer City Initiative. repeal 5611, and abolish the Saber City Initiative. Think outside the box and organize.
Thank you.
We need more.
That's your time. Thank you. All right, we have a motion to reconsider item number 1 for the purposes of an amendment. Is there a second? Excellent. Hearing no objection, we'll reconsider item number 1. Mr. Weezar?
It's more of a clarification that regarding the recommendation for funding 10B in this fiscal year, it is intended to be inclusive of expanding rapid rehousing programs already underway at LASA as well as the county programs. So it's just more of a clarification more than anything. Just
excellent.
We wanted to make sure that LASA, county, and some of that's already inclusive of that. That's all.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to make sure, I mean, there are 2 flexible housing subsidy programs, county and LASA, and we should put the money where it can be most quickly spent. You know, I'm particularly eager to see us do this like as soon as we have a check.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Just a clarification for intent, not so much a motion.
Mr. Clerk? Is that sufficient? Yeah, that's sufficient. Excellent. Well, with that, we are adjourned. For this
Reconsider the item. Would the chairs like to adopt the 5 recommendations included in the comprehensive homeless strategy, including the priorities that were made during today's council meeting?
Yes. All right, now we're adjourned. For real.